Hello, everyone. Welcome. I see the numbers are going up. We'll be getting started in just a moment. We've just opened the webinar, and it takes a few moments for everyone to join. Numbers are still going up. Give it one more minute. Great, I think I'll go ahead and get us started. Good afternoon, good morning, maybe even good evening. Thanks to everyone for joining us today for the open meeting of the Coalition for Action on Healthy Diets from Sustainable Food Systems for Children and All. It's quite a mouthful, so we usually refer to it as the Healthy Diets Coalition. I'm Nancy Aburto, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Food and Nutrition Division of FAO, and I have the pleasure and the honor of being your moderator today. So just that everyone is aware, we're going to be recording today's event for our internal use so that we're sure to capture all of your great input and your comments and also your questions to help us moving forward. I welcome everyone to go ahead and drop in the chat where you're joining us from today. I see that we have almost 150 participants so far. The numbers are still going up, and we'd really like to hear where you're joining us from. So of course, as you all know, the UN Food Systems Summit was held last September in 2021 to great success. And it ended with a proposal of a coalition of the willing to promote healthy diets from sustainable food systems for children and for all. That's our group, and that's why we've come together today. Now, since that moment, a small group of partners, including various UN agencies, civil society partners, academic and research partners, and what we've been referring to as front-runner countries, we've all been working together to try to conceptualize what is the added value of this coalition, the true benefit of coming together. And we've been trying to articulate what is our goal, our vision, and our objectives underneath the auspices of this coalition so that we can achieve, very importantly, a great collaborative action that can accelerate our progress towards zero hunger and malnutrition. Now, today we want to engage with you, a wider group, to present the coalition. We want to share that vision and the aim of the coalition and what we really plan to accomplish, some concrete accomplishments we'd like to plan for in 2022. The coalition structure and its functions are still evolving and still taking shape. And as this is a work in progress, we're going to find it extremely important to hear from you today, to listen to you, to hear your reflections, and also to hear your questions that we can learn from. Now, our coalition really is a coalition of the willing to realize concrete food systems transformation in a local context and in a globalized world. We want to be a connector for healthy and sustainable diets for action, and therefore it's good to know who is out there, who's interested in supporting, and who's interested in the work that's being done. So in addition to those 16 front-runner countries I alluded to earlier who have really formally engaged with the coalition, there's a growing number of countries, I think it's about 18 the last time I was updated on the numbers, that have shown interest in supporting and benefiting from the work of the coalition. Now, as for the work plan itself, over the last 2 months, this core group has been working in collaboration with those front-runner countries towards really finding some concrete actions that we can do together in 2022. And this has been made possible thanks to the very rich feedback that we've gotten from numerous delegations in the development of that work plan throughout the process. And now we've also taken a little bit of time to further develop a list of special projects aiming on catalyzing the coalition's action throughout the year. And you'll hear more about that shortly in our upcoming presentation, where we'll really dive a great deal deeper. This is just an intro. And we'll also be discussing some of the key elements of the principles of engagement for non-stake actors who are also interested in contributing to the work of the coalition. So today we'll have the opportunity to explain to you what the Healthy Diet Coalition aims to achieve. We'll present our current work plan and a timeline. And we welcome your suggestions, your questions, and your remarks. We want to hear what you think about how this is developing and how your organization might like to engage with the coalition. So In addition to dropping your name and where you're joining us from in the chat, if you've got questions, please go ahead and start putting those in using the Q&A function. You can also put some of your reflections and your thoughts in the chat as well as we move throughout the agenda today. But before we go into the presentation of the coalition itself, we are truly honored and pleased to start our event with some remarks from Mr. Stefanos Fotiou. Stefanos is the director of FAO's Office of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is the office within the FAO in which the coordination hub of the UN Food Systems Summit is housed. So we are absolutely thrilled he was able to join us today to provide some remarks on the hub. If you have any questions or if you have any reflections that come to mind as Stefanos is speaking, please, I welcome you to use that Q&A function to share them with us so we can make this interactive. But without any further ado, let me hand it over to Stefanos for his remarks to get us started. Stefanos, please, the floor is yours.
Nancy, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the introduction and for inviting me here. And you know, listening that you are the coalition of the healthy diets, I think that it's a coalition that could really define the future of a lot of things about this world, the future of health, the future of the agri-food systems. I do have a very personal relation with food, and when I was trying to prepare myself for this, to follow this webinar, I looked on healthy diets. I came up to different dietary profiles, and I saw actually that what is considered today by many experts to be a healthy diet is the diet that I had when I was 11, 12, 13 years old in my village in Greece. And I found out that I tried to understand how this thing changed from when I was 13 to now that I'm 53, and I've shifted my diet. And I think that if your coalition could answer the question how we shifted from something very healthy within a development paradigm that wanted to increase the well-being to the people to something that is less healthy, it's a very big thing. Because the last 40 years, we try to achieve more sustainable development, and we might have achieved higher income, higher productivity, but when it comes probably to the way that we are eating our food and are having our diets, maybe we haven't done a lot of progress. So I would like to take 3-4 minutes just to try to share with you some thoughts that right now we are putting together with the colleagues that we are co-designing the UN Food Systems Coordination Hub. And let me say here that when I say with colleagues, I'm not only mentioning FAO, it's the colleagues from all the agencies that they are supporting the hub. And so far we have FP, IFAD, FAO, WHO, UNEP, UNICEF, UNDP, the DCO supporting the hub. I'm very happy to see here Francesco and Lina, which are parts of this team that is co-designing the hub. So what are some main kind of guidelines we have come together? The first is that the main purpose of the hub is to support countries to achieve their national pathways after the Food System Summit. Some countries, they do have pathways that can really give them an implementation plan. Some others might need more support to make the aspirational pathways operational, but we are here and we put in the center of our support the countries. And I talk about the center for our support because we look ourselves at the hub, all the people that they will be seconded from the UN agencies as a circle that it has at the center of its attention the countries, and at the outside of this cycle, we have all this big ecosystem, how we call it ecosystem of support, the collective ecosystem of support that we will try together to support the countries. And in this ecosystem of support, a very important element, and right now emerging as an element that everybody is asking what we will do with the hub, is the coalitions. And I must share with you here some thoughts that we have understood in the hub that there's no way that the hub will operate without having a strong relation with the coalitions. And I think in the course of the next weeks, we will try to find out what exactly the operational relationship of the hub with the coalition should be. And to do this, we will start calling meetings with the coalitions very soon. There are already some coalitions that they're approaching the hub, but we would like to go with a more systematized way to bring the coalitions with some dialogue, maybe with 2 or 3 different dialogues to facilitate different time zones, but will be extremely important. And I want to use this opportunity to say that we would like to use this opportunity even to bring some of the coalitions leaders together to hear from each other. So we would like to reach out to the coalitions, hear from them what is the expectations from their added value that they can provide to the countries, and how the hub could help the coalitions actually to provide the support they want to the countries, and how the hub could be the connector between the coalitions, but also between coalitions and the countries. Because for us, the most important is to look at the coalitions as big tanks, and I don't want to say think tanks, because sometimes you will not be only think, you will be a think and action tank of solutions. And I think this is the key word. We want to create from this ecosystem of support solutions that we can give to the countries. The hub is not here to implement. The hub is here to coordinate. And in this coordination, we do want to identify the added value of the different stakeholders and the different actors of support. And I think one of the main points we will start is to identify the added value of the coalitions. So I'm very hopeful that we will have a very good discussion with all the coalitions. I will ask you, and even if you talk to other coalitions, to give us a little bit of time, because the hub now, we are in a transition phase, we are taking over of the secretariat, and we would prefer, before we come out with specific proposals, to listen a lot. And we are in this listening mode right now. Part of this is, of course, this webinar, but another most important part will be when we will reach out to the coalitions and we'll ask them to have a brainstorming and meeting together. But so far, it seems that we will definitely try to create a very good engagement, a very practical and actionable engagement with the coalitions. I think I'll leave it here, Nancy, and if there's any questions, I'll be happy to follow up.
Thank you so much, Stefanos. Colleagues, please drop your questions in the Q&A, or you may also raise your hand. If you're an attendee, one of the hosts can unmute you and you can ask your question out loud if you would like. I think I failed to mention that previously. But Stefanos, while we wait to see while someone breaks the ice with a question, I wanted to reflect on you mentioning that important sort of personal link to healthy diets. I really find it very powerful when we remind ourselves that we all have a vested interest in healthy diets, and also that diets aren't just what we eat. It's more than that. It's also our culture, it's our history, and indeed it's our future. And that's why we also need to ensure that sustainability part of a healthy diet. Any questions? I don't see any popping up. But Stefanos, again, let's just give everyone a few more minutes. Stefanos is able to stay with us for about 10 more minutes. So this is your chance, colleagues, friends. But as people are waiting, Stefanos, you have talked about reaching out and talking with the coalitions, and I really appreciate that you have highlighted that as a priority of the work of the hub. And you've also mentioned that the hub is not going to be implementing, it's going to be coordinating. Could you speak a little bit about how you envision perhaps that you would bring that coordination work with the coalitions to life?
Thanks, Nancy. So again, by doing the disclaimer that I'm thinking out loud and nothing is set on stone, some thoughts. I've seen 3 areas that we think the hub could have a good engagement with the coalitions. One is peer learning between the coalitions. I've seen only the names of coalitions, and I see that there are some areas that 2 or 3 coalitions are emerging. I don't know how much they talk to each other. And I don't know, and when we talk about systems approach, the coalitions that they have to do with livestock and coalitions that have to do with forestry and coalitions that they have to do with diets, they should come together, because we should not compartmentalize and we should not create new silos with the coalitions. So I think that the peer learning, and I will not call it only learning, the peer exchange between the coalitions is something that the hub could facilitate. The second is to try to match what I would say, the demand from countries. So we have reached out to the conveners right now, and we ask them, what you expect to be the support that you will receive from the hub. And the first results of this survey will become soon public, and we'll organize a webinar to present them. We will start very soon an additional survey with what we call the supply side. And when we put the coalitions there as one main target of the survey. So what the coalitions would like to offer to the countries, what they think, what would be their added value proposition. So matching the demand from the countries with the supply of the coalitions, it's another thing. But again, I say it's not about the hub implementing, it's about coordinating, but in a very systematized way. So if we found, for example, maybe we found that, I had a discussion yesterday with a leader of a coalition that were telling to me that they have put a very sophisticated model together with the International Institute for Advanced System Analysis that can tell you if you increase your production of chicken, what it will mean for emissions of CO2 in Argentina. So when we see that these tools are existing and this can be used by the governments, we want to say that, listen, we have a nice toolkit here coming from 3 different coalitions. Why do you don't look at this toolkit together? And the third thing that I think we can do with the coalitions is to provide them the opportunity to say to the hub what kind of inputs they would like to give to the hub. So I had a question this morning from another colleague that was working on a coalition, and he asked me, are the coalitions going to report on the hub? And my question was no, because I mean, there's no thing that the hub is an agent that it will different actors needs to officially report. But it will be really nice to see what the coalitions would like from the hub to report to the stock taking moment in 2023. So what are main messages that coming from the coalitions that the hub could use in its big advocacy when we talk in the HLPF, when we talk in the stock taking moment, when we talk to the governing bodies of the RBAs. So these are 3 areas I would say that we are looking so far, but I hope that with the reaching out to the coalitions, we can identify more concrete things on what to do together.
Thank you, Stefanos. That was very helpful. I'm seeing the clock here and just being conscious of the fact that you're going to have to leave us. I think I'll ask just one question from the list of a few questions that we've gotten in the Q&A, if that's okay. We have a question coming in from an anonymous attendee that is asking about other stakeholder engagement in the hub itself. Are stakeholders being involved in the hub and in the decision-making process in any way?
Yes, the stakeholders will be involved, and this is a very clear message we had, because when we put together the hub, we have 2 big starting points. One is the statement of the Secretary General at the close of the summit, and the second is an information note that the Deputy Secretary General has put out in November after she met the principals of the RBAs, UNEP, and the DCO. So these 2 documents, which are public documents, are the starting point for the hub. And these documents, they do stipulate that we will have a stakeholder advisory group. I have to tell you, we will change the name because the acronym doesn't look very good there. And we know the constituencies we will start with. So yes, there will be a stakeholder advisory group, engagement group. Don't ask me about the name right now, but it will be official and very, very supportive engagement with the stakeholders. And I'm happy here because also we have the colleagues from WHO that I think they have a particular interest on this part of the work of the hub.
Great, thank you, Stefanos. This is very informative, and we recognize that this is still a work in progress, and really appreciate you coming here today to update not only us from the Healthy Diet Coalition, but all of the audience here that's come to hear more about our coalition, and I'm sure that they're all appreciative of hearing about the hub as well. So thank you once again for your time. Okay.
Thank you, and sorry for not being able to stay for the entire moment, but I need to run to another meeting. Thank you so much.
We understand, thank you. Colleagues, now we're going to move on to our next speaker. We're going to have an opportunity to actually have a presentation to take a deeper dive into what is the Healthy Diet Coalition. So it is my pleasure to introduce an esteemed colleague of mine, Dr. Namukolo Covic, who is the Director General's representative at the International Livestock Research Institute, or ILRI, in Ethiopia. She's also the president of the African Nutrition Society. She's going to be providing you with an update on the coalition's work plan, the timeline for 2022, and after the presentation, we're going to open up the floor for feedback to Namukolo and also to other colleagues that are here to share their thoughts. So please, I welcome you to go ahead and begin putting your questions in the Q&A through the presentation, and we will try to answer as many as we can afterwards. But first, the presentation from Namukolo. Namukolo, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm struggling to move my slide. I'm going to stop sharing and try again.
Okay.
Apologies for that. Can you see my slides?
I can see your slides, but they're not on presentation. So I see there we go. It's on presentation, but not on the first slide, Namukolo.
I'm struggling. The one I am sharing is actually on the first slide. So I don't know what's going on.
Perhaps one of our colleagues could share the slides and help out from a technical point of view. I don't know if Anouk, if you or Jesse or someone else has the slides, they could try to share.
Okay, I think I figured it out.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, can you see this still the same? I'm experiencing a problem. I don't know what's wrong.
I see the slide that says challenge and opportunity. Let's try one more time. I thank everyone for their patience. We've all been doing virtual meetings for a long time, and we still always find some challenges along the way. So thank you everyone for your patience.
I can come in and share my screen if that helps, Namukolo.
Can I? Yeah, I think so. The only thing is I have actually worked on the slides. Go ahead and share your screen. Okay, so I'm going to make this presentation and apologies for the technical challenges. So the presentation is on the Coalition of Action for Healthy Diets from Sustainable Food Systems for Children and All. And Nancy already said it's a mouthful. And so for short, we just say Healthy Diets Coalition, or HDS. Next slide. So in terms of what we are trying to do with the coalition, we are really looking at challenges that we want to address, but also how these challenges provide an opportunity for us. The challenge is really around the 3 billion people who cannot afford a healthy diet, and really leading to the different forms of malnutrition that we have on the planet. And these now becoming the biggest preventable burden of disease virtually in every country. We also know that up to a quarter of all greenhouse gas emissions and a whopping 70% of the biodiversity loss is emanating from the way in which our food systems are currently being managed. And when we look at this, healthy diets from sustainable food systems then becomes quite an enormous potential in terms of helping us delivering on the SDGs. And on this, we see food systems as a triple duty action on addressing undernutrition, first of all, but also overweight on obesity and the diet-related diseases, and of course, the environmental impact that food production produces. And looking at attaining healthy diets for all, we then recognize that there are multiple food systems actors, which makes the process quite complex. And so there is a need for a broad coalition of stakeholders, which is really vital to ensure alignment at all levels and across stakeholders. Next slide. On this slide, we see the vision and goal of the coalition. The vision simply is a world where all people are eating healthy diets from sustainable food systems. And the associated goal is to double the number of people eating healthy diets from sustainable food systems. And we will measure this through a lens of affordability, because that's where much of the data is available at the moment. But we also leave an opportunity later on to include additional indicators that can be used more directly linked to diets as data becomes more available. So really on this vision and goal, we would like to increase the diversity of people's diets, to include a much wider variety of safe, nutritious foods, but also considering appropriate amounts to be consumed. And then we want to increase consumption of foods that are produced sustainably to support all the actions that we need to make and progress on climate, also address issues around soil health, water quality, and of course, mitigating against biodiversity loss. And then we also want to look at limiting consumption of drinks that are high in sugars and other foods that have unhealthy fats, for example, salt, processed food, and also to curb on excesses in areas where there is high consuming groups on different food items. Next slide. So I say the coalition really strives to align actions, and we want to mobilize and support coherent actions through three main areas. The first is on the supply side, focusing on nutritional value to ensure also decent livelihoods and protecting and restoring the environment. And then on the food environment side, we want to enhance and increase access to affordability of nutritious foods, but these should come from sustainable food systems. So sustainability is an important aspect. And then we want to look at enhancing our valuing of food by motivating individuals and families and even communities to eat healthy diets from sustainable food systems. Next slide. On membership, Nancy already in her introductory remarks did indicate who the current members of the coalitions are. First, the 5 action track organizations that led these during the UN Food Systems Summit process, and 2 academic partners. These include the City University London and ILRI as part of the CGIAR. Then we have the UN agencies that have taken on the responsibility of looking after the different coalitions that were developed, as you have heard from Stefanos in his presentation. We have here, it is 16 front-runner countries, but I recall Nancy has already indicated that at last look, there were 18. It's possible there might be more. So this is really a coalition of the willing to take an evidence-based approach to actions and alignment so that we can actually attain the vision and the principles of the coalition. The secretariat that is looking after the coalition is based within the UN agencies, but the GAIN and the EAT foundations are currently manning it for us. Next slide. In looking to develop the coalition further, to the end of last year, going to the UN Food System Summit, we had developed a concept note on the coalition. Since then, there have been efforts to draft a work plan that translates the actions that were stated in the concept note into 3 strategic objectives that we will be working on. The first one is to looking at supporting countries to better mobilize and coordinate actions across the multiple sectors and stakeholders that are important on a food systems approach if we are to deliver sustainable healthy diets. The second one is to facilitate peer-to-peer learning on effective actions that can be used to deliver healthy diets. And then to also look at managing special projects that can be used to integrate nutrition, health, and sustainability into food systems efforts, but contextualized to country priorities and needs. Next slide. So looking at those strategic objectives on mobilizing and coordinating actions, we are looking to mapping stakeholders, policies, and existing resources, as well as tools and initiatives. We will look to assess food systems transformation pathways, for example, for a country to help the country look at identifying priorities, and then facilitating and connecting with existing entities and even with stakeholders that might be interested in assisting a country to meet their objectives. Next slide. On the second function, in terms of our objectives on facilitating peer-to-peer learning, this is very much demand-based and flexible. And here we will look to matching candidates for this peer-to-peer learning based on interest and expertise, but this will include facilitating policy dialogues to advance progress towards the coalition's vision. In this particular perspective, the coalition secretariat will actually endeavor to collate a repertoire of country actions and ambitions so that we can actually have the information that emanates from these peer-to-peer discussions and dialogues so that the lessons that are learned can actually be available for others as well. Next slide. And then on the special projects, for this year, we have listed 4 areas of special projects. The first is on food systems in the nationally determined contributions towards the Paris Agreement to assist countries on that. I'll give a little bit more detail on that shortly. The other is on national food-based dietary guidelines, specifically focusing on incorporating sustainability into these dialogues. These first 2 are put in bold because these are the ones that are quite advanced in terms of already having countries and stakeholders interested in taking these forward. The other 2 are on public engagement, including awareness campaigns, and then on risk and vulnerability perspectives, especially in fragile settings. Next slide. And then on the food systems, in terms of incorporating this into NDCs, the main objective is to develop concrete guidelines on how we can integrate sustainable consumption into these NDCs. And this takes into account the fact that food systems are a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, so that in looking at food systems transformation, we can actually begin to look at how these could be incorporated into the NDCs towards attaining those Paris agreements. And then on purpose, we want, of course, to look at mitigating against greenhouse gas emissions, and also to enhance the role that food systems can play in climate action. And then the leading organizations here are the EAT Foundation, the World Wildlife Fund, UNEP, GAIN, FAO, and Consumers Internationals. And of course, we also call for different stakeholders who might have interest in contributing to come forward and register their interests. Next slide. A bit more details on the special projects on food-based dietary guidelines. The objective here, as earlier indicated, is to really support uptake of concrete guidelines for developing or revising and implementing food systems-based dietary guidelines, really looking at incorporating environmental and sustainability considerations, either in the revision or in the development, if they're being developed for the first time, or even in the implementation process for those countries that have already developed guidelines. The purpose here is really to provide support to countries to make better use of food-based dietary guidelines, taking a food systems perspective, so that the guidelines can actually contribute towards making food systems more sustainable, but also help in the long term to address some of the climate challenges that come from food-based dietary guidelines. The leading organizations here that have already come forward include FAO, WHO, UNEP, GAIN, and WWF, as well as Consumers International. And again, we call for interest from other stakeholders that might see this as an area they could contribute to. Next slide. Now, if we consider the fact that food systems really have multiple actors that are part of the food system, there is indeed bound to be conflicts of interest, especially when we start looking at the role that private sector might play within the food system and some of their interests. So this really requires some kind of firewalling of certain activities in the work plan and certain processes and decision-making to ensure not only transparency, but that we do not work against the vision of the Healthy Diets Coalition as a whole. So the forms of engagement with different stakeholder groups will then depend on planned activities of the Healthy Diets Coalition, but we will look to establish principles of engagement which will be developed by a steering committee to be agreed upon by all the stakeholders. But we need transparency in this so that it is clear what the interests are and that we limit conflicts of interest in the process. We will conduct risk assessment and due diligence procedures, which as we realize are labor intensive, and that the coalition will actually have to look at considering staffing for this purpose. And then we also recognize the fact that many member states already have or are currently developing their own principles of engagement strategies. Some are planning to do so, others already have these. And so we really want the Healthy Diets Coalition to actually gain inspiration and build on some of these strategies that member countries have already developed or are planning to develop. Next slide. On principles of engagement, this is actually a repeat slide. Can you go on to the next slide? On the stakeholder engagements, the coalition really is a coalition of the willing, as has been said by others. And we really want the coalition to be a trusted, unbiased, but evidence-based coalition, also looking into human rights, but that this is what is going to drive the progress towards the vision that has been stated earlier. In our relations with stakeholders, the coalition is looking to having a declaration of commitment so that the coalition members and supporters are then expected to comply to this declaration. And then the other thing is that engagement of activities where stakeholders have specific activities and can contribute, stakeholder can then put themselves forward and indicate how they want to engage with the coalition and what they wish to contribute. And so on this, we really look forward to hearing from you and other stakeholders to indicate what type of expertise you might want to offer and contribute towards the coalition, and then look to partnering on different activities that emerge within the framework that we have indicated. In the chat, my colleagues are going to put a link where you can actually go and register your interest on this food systems community of practice. Thank you, and back over to you, Nancy. And sorry again for the technical issues at the beginning.
Thank you so much, Namukolo. Despite the technical issues at the beginning, we could hear you very well, and we thank you so much for the clarity that you provided. Now, despite the clarity you provided, I am sure that there are lots of questions out there. I see several coming in to the question and answer right now, and we welcome all of those. Continue dropping your questions. I also invite any of you who would like to ask your question live. You can go ahead and raise your hand, and our host can unmute you and allow you to ask your question. But as we wait for that, I do have one question in the chat that I could go ahead and pose. Now, Namukolo, I'm not sure if this one's for you. I think it might actually be better posed to Abigail Perry, who's with us. She's the Director of Nutrition of the World Food Program, one of our important partners in this coalition. And this question is about barriers to healthy diets in fragile context. Has the coalition done anything to identify those barriers, particularly for people in IPC 3, 4, and 5? Abby, do you have any reflections you can share with us?
Thanks, Nancy, and enormous thanks for this particular question. It's a very, very important issue. So this actually is an issue that the Healthy Diets Coalition would like to start to unpack further as one of the special projects that we've identified as being of particular interest and particular value to member states. As things stand at the moment, WFP and indeed potentially other actors have done work in countries that are typically facing humanitarian crises to understand the affordability and access to nutritious diets. So, for example, the Fill the Nutrient Gap tool that WFP developed helps to kind of unpack where the biggest gaps are, what the challenges are in terms of populations facing food insecurity in poorer households, that we can then look at more concrete solutions. What we then need to do really is expand out from that to start to really understand the food system in the broader sense, to look at the barriers that influence and affect that situation. So this is something that we would like to take forward, probably not in 2022, just considering the prioritization for the Healthy Diets Coalition. And we know there are actors out there who've put some thought to this. The Global Panel on Agriculture and Food Systems for Nutrition have done some reflection on food systems in more fragile settings. So we're really keen to see whether there are partners out there who'd like to interrogate this question more, because for sure there's a long way to go and some challenges ahead, but this is a really important part of what we'd like to support countries on. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Abby, much appreciated. I have another question here. I don't see any hands being raised, so I'll go ahead and read this question. And Namukolo, maybe you could answer this one. I think you touched on it in your presentation, but maybe you could reiterate some fine points on this. And it's a simple question. How will the coalition measure success? So it's a short question, maybe not a simple answer.
Short question, indeed, not a simple answer. I think the coalition's success will be measured according to what is happening in the countries, the front-runner countries and others that come forward based on the actions that the countries actually take. The countries decide to take up and address, and based on how that succeeds, because really the coalition is to assist countries address the actions that they want to address within the given framework. So our success will really be measured by the objectives that the country has put for the particular action and how we evolve on that towards those objectives. And then overall, then we could look at how well we have done in addressing those needs that have come to the coalition from the different countries. Thank you. Back over to you, Nancy.
Thank you, Namukolo. Now, I'm going to take another question here from the Q&A, and I'm going to ask Francesco Branca. Francesco, would you join us and maybe take this question? Francesco is the Director of a Nutrition and Food Safety Department at the World Health Organization. And Francesco, if you have anything to add to the response of Namukolo in terms of success, we'd be happy to hear that. And in addition, I have another question for you. This comes from Pat. In terms of the coalition, have the solutions that were identified during the Food System Summit been analyzed so as to identify common frameworks of action?
Thank you, Nancy, and thanks for the questions. Indeed, I would like to reinforce what Namukolo has said. The success of the coalition is documented policy change producing impact at country level. That's what we want to see. We want to see, I mean, you heard the overall objective is improving increasing the number of people who have access to healthy diet. And you know, to get there, we know that there are a number of process steps, including policies to change the food environment. We have documented effective policies. They need to be implemented, and they need to be implemented at scale. And this is connected to the question about what solutions we will champion. Definitely, during the preparatory process of the UN Food System Summit, a number of very important solutions have been identified. Some a bit, let's say, some already tried, implemented in some countries, some innovative. The coalitions will exactly do that. Will avoid that some of those good ideas are forgotten. It will allow those who have put in place the good solutions to share their experience with everybody else. Will create the connections for the people, the partners, the actors who want to make that change, and those who are able to provide the experience, the support, the knowledge for this to happen. So the coalition is really a broker for the collaborations. The hub is also going to be a knowledge broker and will facilitate the connection and the mobilization. But the hub will count a lot on the capacity of the coalitions to mobilize actors. I mean, remember that during the preparation of the Food System Summit, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people involved in the discussion. We don't want to lose that momentum around the food system transformation.
Thank you, Francesco. I really appreciate the comment that coalitions are one way to ensure that those good ideas from the Food Systems Summit don't get forgotten, to really pick them up and take them into action. And I appreciate very much both you and Namukolo mentioning that success is really about country success. It's about impact on the ground to children and all, which is our part of the mission of our coalition. I'm still looking to see if anyone would like to raise their hand and give their question live. We can accommodate that. I have a number of questions in the chat here that are related to potential conflicts of interest, what you've touched on, Namukolo, in the presentation about principles of engagement. But I also have an interesting comment here about engaging the private sector in a positive way. And I wonder, Francesco, before you leave us here, and then over to Namukolo, but maybe you first, Francesco, do you want to reflect on thoughts on engaging the private sector in a positive way in terms of food systems transformation for healthy diets for all?
I think we have to have a very, how can I say, scientific approach, and all actors have something to contribute. We need to be clear about the goals. We need to be clear about the asks to each of the constituencies that can be actors in changing the food system transformation. This is not about where you come from, but this is about what you can contribute to our common path. And I believe that private sectors, of course, we've said it many times, is too generic a definition. There's a lot of very important actors in the private sector that can contribute. Here, for healthy diet, if you look at the whole food system, we have the producers, the primary producers. We have the farmers. We have the ones who transform. We have the manufacturers. We have the distributors. All have very important roles to play to improve the access to healthy diet and to limit the access to the components of our food system that are actually not contributing to healthy diets. So, if we're talking about food manufacturers, there is a clear ask. There's a clear ask that the main portfolio they have of their products contains products that are not high in fat, sugar, and salt. And we know that those products can be produced without that amount of salt and sugar. WHO, for example, is coming with clear benchmarks of how to produce foods, the same foods, but with lower salt, or how to eliminate industrial trans fat, or how to make sure that those foods are safe. But there is more than that. If you think of, for example, the offer of food in public institutions, how can we make sure that those involved in the supply chains are able to guarantee a continuous supply, for example, fruit and vegetable, fresh fruit and vegetables throughout the years at affordable prices? So I think all those solutions need to be clearly identified. All those asks to the different components of the private sector needs to be clearly identified. That's our common task. And then, of course, we would like, on the one hand, the voluntary commitments of those actors to say, okay, we are part of this path. We are going to make this contribution, and or forms of nudging those actors, whether it's regulatory frameworks, whether it's public investment, that are going to push all the actors in that common direction.
Fantastic, thank you, Francesco. Namukolo, do you have any reflections on this question about engaging positively with the private sector?
Yes, just to add, because Francesco actually covered quite a lot of information. I think just to say that the private sector can become a positive force in different ways. one would be, once some of these regulatory guidelines are in place for either limiting salt and sugar and what have you in products, them living up to those standards is one way they can actually contribute positively to the transformation process. But also the idea of having a declaration that they agree to contribute to kind of limits the negative perspectives that we might be able to try and limit from the private sector. But it is extremely important to really engage, but we must also be careful just to make sure that we don't have a situation where a private sector entity does something really wonderful with one hand and something terrible with the other hand, and perhaps 2% good and the rest of their lines don't come anywhere near. So that positive peer pressure on the private sector to do better, I think is an area where there's really hope that those that are willing, this is why I like the term that's a coalition of the willing. So it's a coalition of the willing even amongst the private sector that want to do things different and contribute positive momentum to food systems transformation. Over, back to you.
Thank you, Namukolo. Thank you both for those thoughtful responses. I noticed that we have an attendee with her hand up, so I'm hoping that my colleagues that are working with our technology can help. Fatima El Tahir has her hand up. Could you help her unmute? Fatima, welcome. It looks like you are unmuted.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for very good and nice presentation. My question, is there any guidelines or manual for food science? Mr. Namukolo talked about the standards and threshold, for example, for healthy diet. I ask you as a focal point for healthy diet coalition. Are you developing any manual or guidelines for the countries to follow during the implementation and the follow-up? Thank you.
Namukolo, would you like to speak to that?
I didn't quite get the question. Is it guidelines for how to develop food-based dietary guidelines, or I'm not sure what the question was.
I think, Fatima, I think that your question was related to the food-based dietary guidelines, how the Healthy Diet Coalition might be generating guidelines that could then be implemented at the country?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Namukolo, I invite you to begin, and Anna Islas is with us and can also answer after you answer as well.
Yeah. Just to say that FAO has got guidelines on how to develop food-based dietary guidelines. So that would be the place to start for a country. And then when it comes to the issue around healthy diets, to the context of the country, the processes that are used to develop food-based dietary guidelines actually include that aspect as well, where you go through consultations that look at existing dietary patterns in a particular country, and then coming up with an evidence base upon which you then decide on what the guidelines will look like, because the dietary guidelines are contextualized to country context, and in some cases they even need to be contextualized further to a subnational level. In terms of healthy diets, then we look to WHO in terms of guidelines on intakes and the like, and those further guide the guideline development process. So on that, I think I can pass over to our FAO colleague. If Nancy is around, maybe she can take over and say something.
Thank you, Namukolo. Anna Islas, Anna, I think that was you. I'm sorry, I think I was speaking over you. Anna, yes. Thank you. If you could compliment.
Thank you all. Yes, so FAO for the past 3 years, we have been working on revising the current methodology for developing food-based dietary guidelines through a a series of expert consultations and for including a food systems approach and other dimensions of sustainability. So we expect this new methodology to be published in the third quarter of 2022. Looking forward to other countries expressing their interest on this methodology. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you for joining us while you are in transit. That's dedication. Thank you, Anna. I'll also add that our special project too is food-based dietary guidelines. So how we can best leverage some of the tools that Anna's mentioned, as well as get that context-specific approach when it comes to the food-based dietary guidelines. They really depend on context. And I think that also speaks to one of the questions in the chat about indigenous foods. Stasia said that she would like to see a special focus of including indigenous foods. And I think that this is something that can be highlighted in food-based dietary guidelines in certain contexts. And that's why a country-by-country approach can be very positive. I'd like
I wonder, Nancy, if I can just say something quickly there.
Yes, please.
The latest country on the African continent that has launched food-based dietary guidelines is Zambia. And in their guidelines, they've actually included quite a number of traditional and indigenous foods. So within context, really each country needs to look at our food biodiversity, if you will, because that's the full package that we need for that diverse diet that the guidelines are promoting. So indeed, it is important to look to that for as a resource really for better diets.
Thank you, Namukolo, and thank you for giving us that very concrete example. That's extremely helpful. And I see that we have colleagues from Zambia here who have shared some information in the chat, so that's much appreciated. Now, I'd like to take the next question and turn to another colleague who is joining us from the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. Anouk, can you turn on your video? There you are. Hi, Anouk. Thank you for joining us. We have a question around research. Will there be any research efforts or demonstration projects to develop new solutions or opportunities to advance healthy diets from sustainable food systems?
Yes, thanks, Nancy. And I think it's a really relevant question to ask. I think, first of all, it's important to note that the coalition will act, of course, evidence-based. So we'll use the expertise that is within all of our organizations to make sure that we're working based on the latest evidence and guidelines from research organizations, but also from the UN organizations and the organizations that have led the action tracks and new members that might also join, including member states and others. The country analysis that we're talking about under function 1 will, of course, be more analytic and more research-based, really diving into the food system of a specific country with a focus on healthy diets from sustainable food systems. And there we'll try and really work on with a context-based approach, so making sure that we understand not just what healthy diets means in general, but also what it means in a specific context. Next to that, I would like to add that we also very much focus based on the requests that we get from member states, and that in the future might also be added with additional stakeholders joining us. So in that sense, if we identify a gap or member states identify a gap and they feel that there is need to look into new research or get new information to make sure that they can work on this topic in a better way, we can of course look into whether that fits well with the coalition's vision and its work plan. So I hope that answers the question.
Fantastic, thank you, Anouk. That was very helpful. I have another question here. There are a few questions around sustainability, and I'll pull one out. And I might ask if Brent, could you join us? Brent Loken is with us today from WWF. And the question that I think that you could be well placed to answer is, I was wondering, for the work of NDCs, are there any efforts to liaise with groups that have been focusing on this for a while, such as the NDC partnership? Brent, over to you.
Thanks, Nancy. This is a really, really good meeting. Thank you very much. And this is a very important question about NDCs, and we are definitely liaising with organizations such as the NDC Partnership that are working on this. And we believe very strongly that as we're working on this idea of healthy and sustainable diets, that we don't reinvent the wheel, and that we have to really build on existing mechanisms that are already in place. And whether you agree with some of the outcomes from the last COP, there were some things put in place, the methane pledge, the NDCs are in motion. And we should really try and think about how do we build upon those, improve those, and make sure that we make them better moving forward. So this is something that we're definitely working on, and it's a key leverage point in our work with individual countries.
Great. Brent, can I take advantage of you having your video on to ask another question?
Absolutely.
This question, I'm not sure who it comes from, so I apologize for whomever had dropped it in. I don't see your name. It is, how is the coalition approaching the current trade-off between sustainability in agricultural systems and affordability of healthy food for low-income consumers particularly?
You throw me the trade-off question. I don't have a great answer for this, but rest assured that a really open and honest conversation about trade-offs is something that we're going to have to look into, because there are going to be trade-offs depending on implementation and how we look at this in various countries. I think we tend to frame healthy and sustainable diets as always win-wins or triple wins or whatever want to call them, but that's not always the case. And when we look at trade-offs, it will play out differently depending on each individual country, and that's something that we have to really pivot towards, is that national level context and what the national level situation is, what those trade-offs that could be, and how we can minimize these.
Thank you, Brent. I might just add to that, building off what Anouk was sharing, that part of the research that we do can help us understand what those trade-offs could be, and then help us approach them with that science base to have a more evidence-informed response. So there are a lot of actions that need to go forward, and that's why coming together in this coalition can be so important, so that we can be sure that we're synergizing our efforts and moving for one goal. Thank you, Brent. Namukolo, did you have something you wanted to add? I just see that you unmuted.
I've been unmuted.
Okay. I thought it was an action just now. Apologies.
No.
Fantastic. Okay. Colleagues, friends, I think that we have a few more minutes to take a few more questions, and then we do want to have a few minutes for some closing remarks. I see that a lot of our questions are being answered. Excuse me that I'm looking to the left here. These are where I have the questions. But I see that a lot of questions are indeed being answered or overlapped with some of the questions that were answered. But I do invite in the last few minutes any other questions. As we wait to see if any new questions get dropped in, if
There's
Abby,
a hand up in the attendee.
a hand that just came up. Stefano Gatti. Stefano, I think you can now unmute yourself if you would like to try to speak.
Yeah. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. So first of all, thank you for having the floor. I represent Italy. My name is Stefano Gatti. After the Food System Summit, where I happened also to chair the steering group that organizes the pre-summit in July, where the United Nations Secretariat on behalf of the government of Italy, the government of Italy has decided, to focus even more on these very important issues, and has nominated a special envoy for food security. That is myself. And so I'm here with my team now to follow up, the process and what happens after the Food System Summit and how we can support the overall engagement efforts. So first of all, thank you very much for this meeting. Very, very interesting for us. I would like, as a perspective of a country, possibly say a few things. One, I think is connected to what Stefanos Fotiou was saying at the beginning. All countries, we being one of them, are asking to have obviously a clarification of the coalitions of action, in the sense, how many are there? What are they doing? How can we, as countries, sort of identify them, understand well what they're doing, and decide which one to support. The latest count I've been told is 27. So obviously it means that this is engaging because we have to choose. You know, it's obviously impossible even for a country like Italy to participate in 27 coalition. So we believe that the role of the hub is very important. First of all, in identification, giving information, you know, make understand countries, you know, who is doing what, and then take a decision. Eventually seeing, and that is one point I wanted to raise, you know, duplications. Who is doing what, how many are doing the same thing, you know, and how can we interact? Having said that, obviously this coalition is particularly interested, and we are sort of considering actively to participate. We are trying to also to understand how, you know, and what is the mechanism. But obviously we will be waiting for, you know, the hub to conclude sort of the review process and circulate information to countries on all the coalitions, so we can make an informed choice. You know, where is that the action is taking place, who is doing what, and where can we best enter to support. So I wanted just to say that this is an issue that regards, you know, countries very much. Then I see a lot of things like, you know, private sector, not private sector, you know, of the governance structure. We were looking at the material and the governance structure of the coalition, obviously very interested. If I can give a suggestion, please do not make things too complex, you know, like, you know, straight statements that you have to make to enter the coalition. I see it possibly a little bit problematic, especially for countries, you know, because then I have to make a statement on behalf of my country. I have to ask the government of my country, you know, if they agree on that statement. So it's not a simple process. Finally, I wanted to say, you know, that all this is extremely interested. We will approach, you know, and make a decision to support and join the coalition. That I think will be a very interesting thing to do once we have the overall picture that we are still missing. So we hope. I saw that you have a launch date for May, but I also understand that the hub will be reporting to all countries by the end of March of how many coalitions are there and what they are doing. And finally, you know, I saw also a few questions of compositions. I see that countries already joining. Clearly, there are parts of the world that are missing there. So we surely can. I see that there's no Mediterranean country. So, you know, obviously, I do not want to say that the Mediterranean diet is superior to any other diet, but it's a diet that is healthy and has been recognized, you know, as something very important, so also by UNESCO, and actually there's no Mediterranean diet country there. So one thing that probably as Italy we could do to support is to start discussing with other Mediterranean countries and consider to join together. But there is also a very good remark that there are a number of key Asian countries that are missing there, that, you know, some of these countries have fundamental diets that influence, you know, how big parts of humanities eat, and so obviously we have to look at it. Very final point, we hope that coalitions are, you know, operational, things to do, and we do not continue to have the discussions and the debates that we already had at the summit. We had them, they were concluded, we had conclusions, and we should now go forward in very practical and operational work, and Italy is ready to support this effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefano. I really like those last words about, we've already talked a lot about the problems and thought about some solutions, so let's get to action. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your words of support from the perspective of Italy. I wonder if, Namukolo, do you want to respond to any of Stefano's points, maybe about the launch in May and about the current coalitions, the number of coalitions? Or if someone else would like to respond to that. Oh, you're muted.
I'm not well positioned to speak about the number of coalitions. Anouk might be able to say something about the launch.
Oh, excuse me. I meant to say, I'm sorry. I meant to say the number of countries in the Healthy Diet Coalition.
On the number of countries in the Healthy Diets Coalitions, the countries that are there now are countries that have actually come forward and said they want to be front-runner countries. But there is provision for additional countries to actually come forward. So we will use a similar process to what was done in the Sun movement, when, if you remember, we had early risers and then others joined as time went by. So there's no limit to when a country can come in. And so really countries that are interested in coming on board can come on board. But to move forward with the coalition and get things started, we needed to actually start with those countries that have already expressed interest, and those are the ones that are currently listed. But any other countries that wants to come on board is free to do so.
Thank you, Namukolo. And going back to the number of coalitions that you brought up, Stefano, just to say that it was great to hear from Stefanos earlier in his comments about the hub and his willingness to, as one of the first steps of the hub, be reaching out to the coalitions to be sure that the landscape is well understood so that we can ensure that things can be clarified and that the appropriate connections between coalitions can occur. So we all feel quite optimistic that the development of the coordination hub is going to be very useful in that regard, and hopefully can address some of the things that you've brought up as potential concerns to be aware of. Super. Colleagues, friends, we have about 15 more minutes. And again, I want to be sure we have time for the wrap up, but I would like to invite back Francesco Branca and Abby Perry. If I could ask you each one more quick question to sort of round out our question and answer session, and then we can move to the wrap up. So first, if I could go to Abby. Abby, we've talked about private sector engagement. We've talked about engaging positively. We've had a number of questions and answers in the chat about working with the private sector, but we haven't said a lot about SMEs. And you, coming from the World Food Program, I think have an interesting perspective about work with SMEs. Could you give us a few words about how you think maybe that work might be reflected in the coalition? Thank you, Abby.
Sure. So, I mean, obviously, I think when it comes to even with the SME space, we need to be very careful to begin with that we do agree on the principles of engagement with the coalition. I note that responsible engagement with business is mentioned a few times. So I think it's important that we do have clarity on that. But WFP, together with the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, have co-chaired the SUN Business Network, so the Scaling Up Nutrition Movement Business Network, for a number of years now. And this is primarily about supporting and engaging SMEs in countries to really look at how to strengthen their role and contribution to nutrition objectives. So this work, I think, is really important in terms of ensuring that we are supporting and encouraging and enabling local economies and private sector engagement through local economies. Again, I note there are some, comments in the chat about some of the kind of risks around proliferation of multinational companies and the importance of supporting SMEs. So this has provided some really important experience and learning in terms of what is it that SMEs need to engage more effectively within this space. Obviously, this has come primarily from countries that are lower income countries. So there will be some different dynamics in high income countries to consider. But we'd be very happy to see, together with GAIN, how we can think through engaging that particular network as part of the Healthy Diets Coalition. As I said, once we've also made sure that we've clarified the principles of engagement and that we're all adhering to that. I did, while I'm on the line, just also want to reflect on a question that was raised about the link to the School Meals Coalition. So WFP also is very heavily engaged with the School Meals Coalition, and we're looking at how to ensure that good links are made. I think one of the areas just to highlight as a really important opportunity is where the work on food-based dietary guidelines can touch on the question of what is it that we'd be looking at for the school environment, and the way in which institutional procurement of food, including for schools, can be an important part of driving and supporting shifts in food systems that are beneficial for nutrition. So this is the kind of thing that we'd like, are keen to make sure that we're fostering and supporting those links so that the coalitions fit together like a wonderful jigsaw puzzle.
Thanks, Abby. Thanks for the remarks on SME, and also thanks for that concrete example of how we can work to coordinate these coalitions. Very relevant. So Francesco, I'm going to send the last question your direction, if I may.
Please.
Today, the issue of finance hasn't been discussed. One of our participants has mentioned. Is this something that the coalition has discussed? How is it being considered?
Thanks, Nancy. And by the way, Lina has already provided a written response, but I'd like to add there that the coalition doesn't come to life as a fund, as a resourcing mechanism, as a fundraising mechanism. I mean, the coalition is about making policy change, so each actor coming in will come with their own resources. Having said this, the coalition will also, particularly for special projects that require certain resources, will also seek to develop its own fundraising strategy, and such that key actors who want to act but are missing some of the resources might receive some of this kind of support. I mean, the support sometimes it's not necessarily only the funding per se, but it's a technical expertise, and that's where the collaboration between the different members of the coalition is going to be important. So we can think of course, the UN system is mandated to provide a technical assistance, but we also have a number of groups with long tradition of specialized technical assistance, among specialized in NGOs, for example. But we may have donor countries who might be willing to support specific activities, as well as the peer-to-peer kind of support. So although this is not about getting the money, we hope that all those who want to be active will find a way to be active, either with their own resources, or with our support and the support of donors.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Francesco. I think that that's an excellent final response to a very good question. And you did remind me that colleagues, friends, a lot of these questions did have some additional context in the answers in the Q&A. So please, even those questions that have been answered live, I invite you to look at the Q&A and you might find some additional information that would be of interest. And also look at the chat where lots of resources, links to lots of resources have been shared by colleagues. So we're coming to the end of our program today, but before we go, I am very pleased that Brent Loken is going to come back and share with us his final reflections on today's discussion. I really want to thank everyone for your questions and your comments. It's been very dynamic, even though we were sharing lots of things in writing. I think that it's been very rich. And Brent, he comes to us from WWF. He's actually the global food lead scientist and has a very interesting perspective. He's one of our partners. I come from nutrition. He comes from the sustainability side. And really, we look forward to hearing your thoughts on today's discussion. Brent, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. This has been a really fantastic meeting, and you've done a really fantastic job moderating this. So thank you very much for all the work. And it's been really great to hear so many perspectives, to see so many people interested in this topic. When we first started working on this, last June or July now, I think this is the best case scenario in terms of seeing how this would play out and having so many people from all around the world that are interested in this topic and wanting to join in the work that we want to do. So I've just got 3 quick points that I would like to talk on, and if there's any questions after that, I'd be happy to answer them. And the first thing is, I think most of us are pretty happy with the last year, the focus on food systems. And the focus on healthy and sustainable diets has been great. I think those of us that have been working in this space, we've been waiting to see this moment for a long time. But I would just encourage all of us, and with the help of this coalition and everybody on this call, is that we can't rest on this momentum or on the laurels, that this is just the beginning. As fantastic as the UN Food System Summit was, it did not receive the attention that, like, for example, COP does. And diets continues to be ignored in key international policy frameworks like the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, land use, and also biodiversity. And we have to work and continue to push every single day with this coalition and every single person on this call to make sure that this issue gets lifted to the highest levels, because it's not there yet. Secondly, is we can't ignore the environment. I come from WWF, I work at WWF, and when we talk about healthy diets, healthy and sustainable diets, the focus tends to be on health. And, you know, I would like to encourage us to continue to think about the environment, that the health and environmental components of this are two of the same sides of the same coin, and we can't, you know, we can't ignore one of them. You know, what we're starting to find, and what the science is really telling us, is that if we continue to ignore healthy and sustainable diets, that we will not be able to achieve key environmental goals, whether it's climate goals, environmental goals, land use goals, and that even if we implement the most innovative farming practices, food loss and waste, but we don't address diets, we will still have rising demand for land, rising demand and rising loss of biodiversity. And that's why we have to address all components of this food system and take a food systems approach. And that includes looking at diets. The third thing is, you know, as we're looking towards next steps, as we're looking towards this, you know, what do we do this year? We really have to start pivoting towards national level action. I think at the global level, we have a very good understanding about the impact of diets. We have a very good understanding of how this plays out at the global level, what these global targets look like. But it's a lot murkier when we come to national level action, how this will play out in individual countries. And we have to come to terms with not every single country will you know, address this in the same way. And I think this is one of the reasons where, with this coalition, the more partners that we get on board, the more countries that we get on board, we'll be able to start to sort out the global jigsaw puzzle in terms of how this plays out in different places and how we put it all together to achieve those global goals. And there are some key things that we are working on, like the NDGs, I think is an important part of this work that we're doing, the NDCs that we're doing. And we really need to start pivoting towards and thinking about that national level action. You know, it's been an honor to be part of this coalition, an honor to be working with such fantastic colleagues on this. And we look forward to working with all of you moving forward. So Nancy, and to everybody on this call, thank you very much for your work and your efforts. And we look forward to working with each one of you moving forward, and for everybody on this planet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grant. Thank you for highlighting some of these key efforts and really giving us all some food for thought moving forward, really some inspirational words and some thought-provoking words. So colleagues, participants, thank all of you for your time today, for participating during this meeting, and for playing key roles in your countries and your organizations for advancing the agenda to support healthy diets. Now, our next step for the Healthy Diet Coalition is we'll be making public a number of relevant content, a number of pieces of relevant content, the updated version of the work plan, today's presentation, the principles of engagement when they've evolved to a draft. We'll be able to update these and share these via the websites of the various members. We'll also reflect back on the questions today, some of the things we saw in the chat, some of the things that we got through the Q&A. And we really encourage all of you to reach out and let us know about what you're doing at the country level in relation to the objectives and the activities of the coalition, so that we can get to know who's out there working at the country level that maybe we're not aware of it as much at the global level. And as Britt was just highlighting, we really need to pivot to be sure that we're focusing on that country level action and those objectives and that impact. And that's been repeated a few times today. Also, reach out, please, with your expressions of interest regarding your potential involvement in some of the special projects or in some of the action areas of the coalition. Now, as you've heard a few times today, the coalition and the details are still a work in progress, and we'll continue to communicate that progress. A big appreciation for today's discussants and for our presenters, those that were able to stay the whole time. Thank you very much for dedicating so much time out of your busy schedules this afternoon. Thanks also to the colleagues that were working behind the scenes, keeping things going and helping us work through technical issues as well. And again, to all of you, thank you for joining us today. Take care, have a lovely afternoon, and I suppose officially I can say that this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.